The fundamental is fear of losing money, fear of losing brand rep. And I think that's, again, very core to content, social media, digital, which is how do you humanize brand? A few moments that you can create as a brand in your lifetime on social, that's fine. But that whole I have to win every single day, every single post, but I think the real question is, by saying more, are you saying different things? Or by saying more, are you going deeper into the same thing or repeating the same thing in different ways?
Hello and welcome to Your Heart's Content,
a show where we try to analyze the parts of content that really matter.
We talk to musicians, artists, illustrators, designers, stand-up comics,
Folks in the business of content, all in a bid to try and understand this space of content a little better
and how you could benefit from it. In this conversation, we speak with Hailey Shah. Hailey has the unique experience of working both at legacy and today's new age media companies. What's interesting about her is that she started her career when we were transitioning from so-called traditional media to more of a digital media. And everybody, right from brands to people to agencies and everyone in the ecosystem, was trying to figure out this beast called digital. We talk about how media and content is an execution business and how it is really important to build long-term IPs which become templates, like Business Insider's Still Standing and So Expensive, and even Wired's format of getting experts to answer questions from the internet. We talk about how companies, not just in India, but even globally, look at content and what the journey of content as a piece of business is going to be. I personally enjoyed this conversation for the wide-ranging insights Hailey gave us, and I hope you do too. Hailey, thank you so much for coming today, and also especially thank you because, as I've been saying to my last guest yesterday, Bombay rains have been crazy. They are crazy. So thank you so much for making it. But I wanted to talk to you about a whole bunch of things, but I really want to talk to you about your journey, right? Because you have, been with every media company / format I can largely think of over a period of a decade and more, right? I just wanted to talk to us about how that journey started and what happened during those years and where are you now in that sense?
Okay, so firstly, thank you for having me. So the journey started in, I want to say 2008. Obviously, I picked BMM as my vocation at that time. I thought it'll be interesting because I liked writing, and somebody did an aptitude test back in school which said I was good at some essay, which I had no idea. I think it's the education system really doesn't help you identify what are the things you're good at. It's very good at telling you what you're not good at, like math, for example. So you always feel like a little bit inadequate, but I don't know how this kind of stuck with me. And I was a young 17, 18-year-old pre-BMM trying to think you can change the world with writing. So I picked that. I thought it'd be interesting. Obviously, it came naturally to me. It felt like I can talk to people. I'm just generally open with communication. So felt like communication's the right kind of path. In that, I picked journalism, and I have a few interesting stories in terms of how I finally got here, but there were many random hiccups in the way. After I graduated, I somehow figured I want to be a dancer.
I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, this is amazing. Please tell us more about this.
Yeah, so I've been dancing my whole life. I thought I started at 4. My mom put me in like random folk class and this class and all sorts of different dance forms. So I practiced a lot of that throughout my life. And I thought, okay, maybe this is my calling. And I tried that for, I want to say, a year and a half professionally. I always did Shamak. Anyone in Bombay has always done Shamak classes. So I thought it was a great discipline. I really enjoyed it. It was a passion. Soon enough, I figured I can never make money out of this. And then I started doing a part-time job with a social media agency called Drizzlin. We sat out of the Web Chutney office. It was my first ever visual experience of what an agency life looks like, because you've always heard about it throughout your BMM journey. We have lots of different professors who came in to teach us. So I had some verbal reference point of what the agency life can be, what creativity means. Everyone's creative, but how do you find that voice in yourself? So I had all this theoretical, sort of versions of it. And then I finally got to see it up close and personal. I did that for a bit. Then I moved to a couple more agencies. This is very early years, right? So I want to say 2010 is when I really started to take it more seriously. Quit dancing at that point, made this my full-time profession. And these were the days when I think Facebook, Twitter, all of them had just about, started seeping into the Indian brand ecosystem. So the HULs of the world, all these people finally started to take these platforms seriously to say, we need a strategy. How do we start disseminating content here? What kind of content do we create to begin with? And that's when I first heard the term branded content outside the context of college. But I started to understand it more seriously. And then early case studies of really understanding what the Michelin star stood for. How did they really come about with this kind of prestigious format, which is then translated around the world. So I think these kind of case studies started just coming my way. I think once you're in it, you tend to consume more of it. Obviously, early years, I can't even remember, what I contributed to it. But somehow, as a young person, you just have ideas and you put them on a PPT. They were kind of appreciated by, bosses or external, clients, whom you go to with pitches. I started pitching very, very early on. This was as early as then, it became more of a biz dev plus execution of what was going on in those agencies. And that I think gave me the confidence to say that, okay, I can speak in a group full of, a room full of people where I can pitch ideas, where I can, even kind of counter a thought and discuss and dissect it. Be able to address brand questions. So I think education for brands in terms of what social content can mean for you, how do you connect with audiences, how distribution is an important aspect of it, because you can create all you want, but if it's not reaching far and wide audiences, especially with FMCG companies, when reach and frequency is all you really want to talk about over and over again, I think these were, things that we just sort of kind of discussed very early on. And I think few things back then also, sorry to digress a bit, but just a thought in my mind was
I already have 3 questions to ask you, so digress even further. Please.
So back then also people would say, okay, हमने ये TVC बनाया है, can you just put it on,
Oh, yes.
And we're like, yeah, but
Make that 4.
Make
that 4 things to ask.
Or TV, right? Yeah. So why? We have to rethink. So I mean, I was learning as the industry was learning, which I think became, my edge, which gave me, insights which a lot of other people, my generation would have. But even right now, digital first generation folks don't know how people got into digital, right? So I think that entire journey was super interesting. I obviously eventually moved out of all things social media, figured that I don't want to be on the side of selling the content, but the platform is something that I have no control over. And I started getting excited by the concept of platforms. OML just happened, again, very interesting personal story, but I was at my first ever weekender in 2000, I want to say 11 or 12. And I saw the Loudest Crew was being addressed by Bobby Talwar at that point.
The Loudest Crew, for those who don't know, is the volunteer force that is branded as the Loudest Crew.
Yeah, and I thought that was so smart. These people who love music, who love the arts, who want to work, who want to get the experience of what it's like to work on an IP. An enthusiastic bunch. I've done all of that in my dance career, right? So it was literally the manifestation of my world of art and dance with the manifestation of something that's done at scale. Because you think about dance and theatre, I don't think it still has the scale that music does. Barring Broadway and, larger shows which are now coming down. But I think back then it was very indie. You'll have a jazz class, you'll have a bachata class, you'll have random things happening. But I never experienced scale of that nature. So I was completely blown away by art and commerce and music and content and all of that coming together on stage when Bobby was speaking. And I was like, okay, this is where I want to work. So I saw a random tweet by NH7 which said looking for a social media ninja. And I was like, yeah, okay, like tacky, but yes.
Yeah, the ninja thing was like completely not needed, but
It's okay. 2012 was a different time.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
used to be social media maven. It's okay.
Exactly.
It's okay. Everyone has.
I was like, yes, I am the ninja. Proudly sort of,
Black
said-
belt and all. That would have been awesome if you had actually gone for the interview with that. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my, that's when I, of course, got through a bunch of interviews, etc. Started working at OML. And there also I did start with social media, but I knew that my path has to be beyond that. And I was lucky enough to be part of the Insider.in core team very early on, while the product was still being developed, while we were figuring out who we will be or what kind of a platform we want to be. After that, and again, lots of thinking and interesting things happened at that point, but it was very exciting for me because obviously it was the first time to be in a room where you're getting to build something from scratch. We did a really fun brand exercise, which I picked up from another boss of mine at a different time, but it was basically archetypes and who are you, and
Oh, yes.
very
Love those
interesting
exercises.
questions where
Yeah.
one of the questions was, if you were to stop existing today, what would your obituary say?
Yeah.
And I loved that, right? So we brought all of that to the drawing room. It was literally like a bunch of enthusiastic folks just trying to figure this out as a project.
Yeah.
Obviously, it took the shape and form that it did. And, Shreyas and all these guys, like, great vision and great execution, and all of that really took shape to where it is today. And back then, again, I figured ticketing is not something I see myself doing for a long time because, again, I was still more attracted by content and storytelling rather than the tactical sort of aspect of a ticketing platform. But it's more tech heavy than, creative in that sense. And that's when I think LBB happened. So interestingly, LBB also, of course, Delhi-based company, which has a great network. They were looking for somebody to help them scale Bombay. So we already had an editorial team. We already had like a video and partnerships kind of a team, but then revenue was something that we were looking to scale. So felt like with my experience of doing social plus content plus e-commerce plus business development as the underlying theme of all that I've done, it just, again, kind of worked out. And I was there for about 4 years. Times happened after that, which is, again, very interesting because this subsection of Times that I was a part of is called Times Bridge, which is basically a VC arm of the Times Group. Again, I love the mission. It was basically helping international companies set up shop in India and, just trying to help them navigate this complex country, both from a consumer side, government and policies and platforms, and how do you, again, scale. Very interesting problem statements, and each company had its own different scale of maturity and the stage at which they were. So how do you really sort of build that out in India for them? And then Condi was always on my list of companies to work for, and then it happened. So I'm like super happy about where I am now. But this is really the long and short of the whole story and the journey of how
That's lovely. Like so many places to take, but let's go back right to the beginning. And I didn't think that this would be a question that I'd ask because we had parallel roles in many ways in competing agencies. I guess I used to handle business development for an agency, for a small social media agency when Chimes at that point of time as well. And I found it very interesting. This is not a question as much. I just want to share your experience if you've gone through the same thing that I did, because when we got into digital at a very interesting time, right, when these things were maturing, and we weren't really taught any of this in your case, BMM, in my case, in Mica, coming from the best communication school or whatever, but they never had a module on digital, fair enough, because at that point of time, 2007, 2009, digital wasn't important enough to warrant even a guest session at Mica. And we kind of made up our own theories and stuff like that as we were going along and as we were navigating, knowing that we were part of, and later when I joined like proper ad agency like Ogilvy and Burnett, you had to marry their knowledge of brand structures and all that with your newfound knowledge of digital, trying to make sense of the entire thing. For me, that was extremely equally enriching and frustrating. The frustrating part let's not get into. The enriching part was like, oh wow, okay, you're trying to figure this out on your own, and you are kind of trying to be a strategist, but you're also the tech guy for the mainline folks who don't understand how these things work. So you're kind of like the IT guy in some sense, fielding stupid questions. Like I remember going for a conference once and impressing everyone, saying that I am like digital guy, whatever. And I get a call back from a senior guy the next day, and I thought, he's going to invite me some pictures. I'm thinking, like, what's the difference between a GIF and a JPEG? Like, what's the question that he asked? So this was 2015 or 16, by the way. Anyway, so what I really wanted to ask was, how did you kind of learn those kind of theories yourself, and how important was your own personal consumption of the internet important for you from a business perspective? For me, it was very important. I was very active on Twitter, all that. I had a point of view on the internet as a consumer, and I felt that really helped shape what I was kind of pitching to clients. And another thing is, I never thought about it until you said this, is that just like you done hundreds of pitches, small social media agency, I never realized that was in many ways my first public speaking sort of thing, which later maybe gave me the confidence to, do this today. So it's interesting. I never thought of that till you said that.
Awesome. Yeah, but I agree with you that, so both, I agree with you, it was exhilarating and it was frustrating because every point of view you had in those meetings was countered by something that belonged to a different time, different school of thought, which really, made it such a hard sell, right? And I think that's what led to larger gestation periods, larger learning curves, but also led to great relationships, because I feel if we collectively, whatever that group of people on a project did together, both from the client side and the agency / whatever avatar of company did it together, it became such a moment of pride, saying, okay, we cracked something, right? And that builds bonds in a way where you're like, okay, cool, we did that one thing together.
One thing,
and this
maybe
is
a small thing, like a small hashtag campaign, but we figured it out when there was no playbook for
like a mommy blogger campaign. Like I remember doing a campaign for Kingston, which is that USB company. So they had a mascot called Rex. And that was one of my first few campaigns at Dresden, where we're like, okay, Rex ka birthday hai. And we're like, okay, what? How are you going to... So,
make GBs and GBs of memories with Rex.
Yeah, we're like, wish Rex happy birthday or something. I don't know what we did. I can't
just like people say the 60s were a different time, the early 2010s were a different time for marketers and digital folks.
So what ended
blast from the past.
Blast from past, really. What ended up helping me though was my consumer lens, which was like, would I engage with this? Really?
Exactly, right?
And if the answer was no, I would try and, steer my clients to think about, but why? Really, think about it. If you were somebody saying, Daag achhe hai, or Rex ka birthday hai, right? Whatever those campaigns be, I don't know what about it is going to excite people. At the same time, the flip side to what I'm saying is also a lot of people did engage, right? And I was taken aback on some days where I was like, okay, I thought this does not work at all, which is also where you put yourself in check. You're not the voice or consumer for everything you're putting outside there. So that balance was really tricky. And I still think you have to keep those checks and balances, because that still happens, right? For anything we consume, have a point of view on, think it may not work, but is doing really well, are questions that you continue to ask yourself about where really is that line, and should you be the gatekeeper of a good or a bad idea or a good or a bad campaign. So I think these were like really fun, interesting campaigns, and that's where the personal consumption, there are things that you enjoy for a certain time. I also think it's important to keep evolving that and trying different things, because it'll only broaden that horizon. At the same time, there is a certain taste you have as an individual, right? Like for me, I love slow-paced interviews. I love things that have a certain pace, rather not just interviews, but I like paced content versus really fast, hard-hitting, quick cuts. But then that can't be the lens that I apply to, what I work on with my brands or my clients. So, I think it's good to keep just sort of consuming so much more stuff, reading comments, seeing what worked, insights. It's not really that obvious, as you would think, because it's like, okay, I consume so much of it, I should by default have an opinion on it. But I think more conversations of this nature, I think, are almost a self-discovery process, which is why I think almost everyone should have something that they do, whether in a closed group or outside. But it just helps you really discover or be more self-aware. And I think that in itself is an interesting journey to go on.
Yeah. I want to ask one specific thing, right? Because you said, and you also mentioned that, right, that both of you got into sales and BD very early, right? Now, the media landscape changes much faster today than it was changing then. And you were getting objections on content per se from a traditional media point of view versus a new media. And you are still in growth and monetization roles, right? And I'm sure you still get objections on things. Tell me about the nature of objections. Has it changed because the mediums have changed? Or at a fundamental level, the objections are similar? How does that look like? How do those conversations look like?
So I think objections, there is an underlying theme which I think has been around for years, which is what's the ROI? And I think it is very, I don't know how, obviously there are metrics, obviously there are KPIs, there's impressions and page views and reach and frequency and, views and whatever, right? Like you'll put the terms to it, you'll do all of that. But I find that to be an interesting sort of moment to say, okay, the narrative that you want to build and the story that you want to create, the advocacy that you want to create around the brand or the conversations you want to drive, it's going to take time. So my counter usually, and objections are fair. Of course, you're putting money in it. You want bang for your buck. You want to know when will you see that ROI. But I think because content is so diverse, I don't think any of us, even as people working in this space / experts, know when will that really. Like, of course, there are immediate campaigns on performance where you know. But they're designed for that.
Performance campaign. So they're designed for that.
Yeah. They're designed for that. So I think, and I've been listening to a lot of these conversations that other podcasts are having around, the stage of maturity that the company's at really defines how much you put into performance versus when do you start brand marketing, when do you start storytelling, when do you start building advocacy, who are these evangelists who are going to carry your story forward. And I think with D2C, it really varies with each industry, each product line or each kind of whether you want to go retail or not. I think it's too diverse. I don't think there are any one answer. So I would rather sit with the brand to really figure that answer out together, right? Than be like, I have the answer for you, right?
Yeah.
So I really think it's important that collectively we figure out saying, what is the success for this?
Yeah.
What does success look like to you, right? And I would counter them back to say, what is it that you want to achieve? And let's then build layers to this. The layer can be of a longer content bank, which will then have a larger sustenance. The layer can be, we get, create a network of people who will then sort of distribute it further. I don't have many different answers to it, but I think what success looks like has to be defined together. And performance is, I think it's very fast evolving. I don't think things that worked back then work now. So I don't know. I think it's a very broad question, which I'm not sure who has the right answer.
I'll add one thing to what you said to answer your question. Your question was, are the pushbacks largely the same from now to then? And one obvious answer for that is ROI plus, all that sort of thing. And the other is the softer side of things. I'm going to say, this is not us / is this idea too edgy / will audiences resonate with this / we are too scared to put this out, that entire this thing. And here's my meta observation. I think either of these things are not incumbent on digital landscape today, 10 years back, or even 50 years ago. David Ogilvy said, half of my money is wasted. I don't know which half. Right? So I think these two problems have, and if anyone has seen Mad Men, they'll know clients are scared of putting some stuff. So these two universal problems have always sort of existed. Except maybe you can say that today it is just a lot more complicated because of the fragmentation of platforms and audiences, where to find them and all that sort of thing. So I am pretty sure you will agree on these two
Both, you're right.
broad buckets, right?
And
They
brand
kind of go-
safety
yeah.
is a question.
And all that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Now that becomes a new thing to add in. Worried about, oh, this influencer that we've signed on, what if he or she shoots her mouth off? And, do we want to be associated? All that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think.
Or if my content appears next to other content which I don't want to be seen with, then can you really control it 100%? And
Yeah.
all those conversations.
So, in some sense, there are no new challenges. It's just that the avatars have kind of changed in some way. Right?
Yeah, the fundamental is fear. Fear of losing money, fear of losing brand rep.
Yeah.
And how do you tackle those fears? I'm sure there'll be other forms of this.
Yeah. And they will
of
continue
course,
to happen as platforms evolve. As like if you're all walking around wearing VR headsets in 10 years, then that 3D or spatial computing equivalent of this will be there at that point of time.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I think these are primarily
Primarily, yeah. Fundamental human, not human.
The more things change, the more they remain the same.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But now that you say human, it brings me back to one of the taglines of one of the agencies I worked with, was humanizing brands. And I think that's, again, very core to content, social media, digital, which is how do you humanize brands, and are they really supposed to be that engaging?
Yeah.
Are you supposed to reply to every comment that comes to you? Are you supposed to, I don't know, like where is that line, you can start taking things
100%.
personally.
Like as people who work in the industry, it's easy for us to say, yeah, of course you should have tone of voice, you should have this thing. And then you see John Oliver saying, McDonald's sells me fries. Why do you need the Twitter? And actually,
Questions we've all asked ourselves.
That's a great point. And sometimes I would go to the extent of even saying, genuinely do not think social media content by itself has changed the fortunes of any company beyond a point. It might have given some of them a leg up. Sure, you got to the public domain and all that, maybe Dollar Shave Club and all that sort of thing. As a format exists, but I don't think any large company that kills it on social media, as they say, sure, you got a few eyeballs here and there. I don't think it fundamentally has changed business in any way, because I think ultimately what's happened is because of this fragmented landscape and so many different kind of brand content coming from all kinds of directions, that ultimately the winner is product. People who have companies that have a better product succeeds. And as the saying goes, bad product cannot succeed even with the greatest marketing, whereas a good product can succeed even with mediocre advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know begs to differ, but anyway.
No, so I think really it's about that one a few moments that you can create as a brand in your lifetime.
It really is. Yeah.
As on social or wherever, right? Whatever your platform be. But it is trying to break through the clutter through that medium. And I think if you get few right every year, couple of years, or in a longer duration as well, that's fine. But that whole I have to win every single day, every single post, you have to have certain hero moments, milestone moments, tent poles that you do, and the rest has to be your BAU. So I think the pressure of everything must get all the views there are.
I think that is a beautiful segue into, say, let's take brands out of the equation and let's put, say, creators in there. Does the same thing kind of apply, you feel? Like the pressure, exactly what you said, pressure to keep doing stuff every day, few outsized things that people remember. Does that framework apply the same way? Especially since in many ways, content creation, etc. has become gamified, metricified in many of the same ways that brands pressurized us to do, right?
Yeah, I think it does apply to individuals also. I think it's important to get your basics in terms of who you are, why is your unique perspective the one that matters in this context of whatever you're trying to say. Putting it out in different formats, and again, we can get into formats a bit later, but how frequently to even talk, I think, is a question, especially if you have a day job, right? To be able to say that I'm going to produce something weekly, monthly, whatever, right? There is a certain cadence that you hope to set for yourself. The ambition is always, I want to increase this frequency. But I think the real question is, by saying more, are you saying different things? Or by saying more, are you going deeper into the same thing? Or repeating the same thing in different ways? it's like a good book, right? Like you have one or two takeaways in the book, but are you making it a fat version?
Instead of blog masquerading as a book, as they say. Yeah.
In non-fiction space, especially, right?
Yeah.
One insight, 10 examples.
Yeah.
2 would have sufficed.
Yeah, you get the point.
You
Exactly.
get the point, yeah. So then let me ask you to define, I think, the most difficult word in the last 15 years, straddling all these different kinds of media, which is authenticity. They say that authenticity is the key to success as a brand, as a creator, whatever. How do you think about this? Somebody who's straddled so many different worlds and even now has a product angle as well. So what is authentic then? Like, maybe you can start with what are some examples of creators or even just regular ordinary folks who you think are genuinely authentic and all that?
Okay, I'm going to take one step back to philosophically think about
please.
what
We always end up there
authenticity
only.
is. Because I find it very hard to even ask myself the question, am I being my true authentic self? One, I don't think we have the self-awareness that we think we do. Like, obviously, we all like to think you kind of know the fundamental things about yourself or how you are in certain situations, how you are around certain groups of people. But I think it's evolving all the time, constantly. And it's very hard to tie yourself down to like, okay, this is who I am. This is who I will be. This is who I will continue to, chase. I don't think that should be the mantra. I think it's really about how curious you are, what kind of associations, whether people, things, interests. I think it's really about all of that because you're a combination of everything, right? You're not a combination of just characteristics of what values you stand for. Values can also evolve. You can have a different POV. You're free to change how you think, what you believe in. And I think to try and box it is hard. Obviously, you still, and I don't think that takes away from the fact that, yes, you're expected to be authentic.
Yeah.
But again, the pressure of it is too high. I think it's probably, and I'm just spitballing here to think about whether an individual creator or a brand find, I don't know, fundamental things that you know about yourself or you think that haven't changed in a while, maybe, right? Yeah. There could be some things that you see as a pattern that you've known since you were a kid, things you, value systems that you really have, which are very core to who you are. And that becomes just a framework. But that's not a boundary. You can step outside the boundary, you can come back in, you can create different versions of it, you can experiment in different permutation combinations or degrees of it, right? Intensity-wise also. And that's completely okay. But I think the word is definitely overused. Like you said, the fries need to be authentic. No, the recipe has to be the same, right? Consistency is in the ingredient, is in the form in which you're presenting it to me or the crunch that I want, right? Like that. To the fry, that is authenticity. I don't know what that means, but that's the predictability I want from that product. People do want predictability from their creators also, right? Because I think it just helps a little bit of like, then I would know what to expect when I'm opening that particular YouTube channel, for example, right? So I want that comfort almost, the familiarity of it. So, if you have a particular point of view and, the next episode you have the exact opposite point of view, the third episode you have some that really would throw me off completely, right? And I was like, what is this person about? Does my value system match with their value system or not? And that's kind of hard to keep shifting and juggling around with. So I think it can serve as a framework. It can serve as a jump off point. But can it lead you to different directions? Can you have contradicting voices as guests maybe or, other people that you interact with? Like brands do collab posts or brands do whatever, right? There are so many different versions now that are available for people to say, I can step outside my authentic value system or framework that I've created for myself to at least get a counterpoint of view or be able to experiment with something. Like you could be a very serious brand, but collaborate with a very playful brand. And that's completely okay, right? I think, in fact, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. So maybe certain, and that's why going back to the archetypes, right? Like there are definitely few things that are core, fundamental to who you are, and you want to keep that alive. You want to build on it. You want to get deeper into it, and that's great. But should that restrict you from saying, okay, this is not my authentic self, so I will not experiment with this thing or not create this type of thing? Maybe not. I don't know.
No, that resonates with me personally so much because I run a slow travel podcast, and I see all of the things I do in life is basically chasing my curiosities. And for example, my day job as a career is consumer research, where I'm curious about how people are thinking and what they're doing. And the podcast is this, and in many ways, the show is that itself, right? But of course, this has also come after a fair amount of experiences, self-reflection, and has come at a certain age, right? But how would you think about either a brand or a creator who's just starting out, right? You don't even know who yourself are before you say, this is my authentic self, right? So then is it important to even draw the boundary at all? Or is it just important to just experiment, and maybe that will help you draw the boundary? How do you think of that?
Interesting. So I was talking to a friend of mine about this recently, and I think what he said was basically that experiment in smaller groups of people, which I found very interesting, right? Like if you think you're a funny person, for example, put it on a WhatsApp and gauge out of 8 people on the group, did, I don't know, 3 react to it, 5 react to it. And he himself is like a baker / passionate about food. So he just keeps making batches of cookies and sends it off to all his friends. And all of us are like, this is a business, right? Obviously, there are many cookie companies, but you could do this, and there is potential here, even if it's just small passion project, etc. But just sends it as samples, right? And he's trying out different formulas, like different recipes, but basically just core sample set of people who know you well. Almost they become a sounding board in that sense, right? They'll be able to, because I think your friends know you better than you know yourself, right? Or people around you, really. So can they really become that jump off point for you? Can they become the sample size for you to then help you refine things a little bit more, at least give you initial feedback, not like literal feedback, do this, do that, but generally from their reaction, you can try and gauge what is or isn't working. So maybe that. And then I think for a new creator, I think the biggest question is, what in your context makes you the right person, or you the unique voice to have this point of view at all?
Sure.
Right? So I think that, and again, it could be, everyone's interests are so varied, right? Like you could be for you travel, or somebody else it's food, or somebody else it's music. So if there are a few things that again you see as a pattern in your life that have been with you, for you music is such a big thing, and you do so many things around music as a core, just as a center point, right? Whether it's listening sessions or stuff that you write about. So I think it's just you kind of inherently have it in you, and then you also have other varied experiences, but then there will be something you kind of keep coming back to more often than not, or it just interests you enough to go deeper into, and you see a certain path to how you can scale it eventually. Or you also have co-collaborators or co-conspirators who will feed into what you're trying to do, and that could be your, I don't know, entourage of people who become that. Again, I know for you, the headphone zone guys, somebody you kind of connect with. But yeah, I think those are the maybe questions to ask yourself before you start identifying, what do I want to do? Why do I want to create it? For how long? Maybe it's episodic, maybe it's one season and you take a break for a year and you come back next year. I don't think there is a, if I become a content creator, I must
need to
do this. Yeah. There's no formula.
Yeah.
I mean, there are formulas. Again, if that's your ambition in terms of what, Tanmay and these guys are doing, it's a very different career path. Then I think, of course, you need to get more serious and figure out what that means for you. But as a person who's doing this to enhance your own understanding of something or get deeper, or for fun, purely for fun.
Absolutely.
Like I made cookies, I make a reel of it because I love it. I send it to 10 friends. Then I think that's completely...
I love one of the things that you said before, and you kind of said it again this time, which is kind of track back what you used to like as a kid and what are those things that remain constant. So at a very superficial level, you could say, like, for example, for me, it might be music, for you, it might be travel, whatever the case may be. You used to like books then, you used to read Nancy Drew, now you read whatever, Arthur C. Clarke, whatever, and you graduate to something. It might also be interesting to think about what attracted you to those kinds of things, and at each stage there are some things that you also did not like. why did you not like those, right? For example, a question that I asked myself, for example, in the context of music a couple of years back is, I am a big fan of a lot of heavy metal, like Metallica, Iron Maiden, etc. But I'm not a big fan of Megadeth. And I asked myself, okay, why is that? Now, what are the reasons why that is happening? And I try to rewind back to my childhood where I was a big fan of Famous Five, but not so much of, say, something else. I forget which ones exactly I wasn't a fan of. And I think those are cartoons, right? Like, and stuff like that. You try to, I think, then joining those things together will give you more meaningful connects than just saying, I like music, then I like music now. I think that becomes a little superficial. This is just an extrapolation of exactly what you said.
But I live by this philosophy where I think process of elimination helps you in every aspect of thing.
What you are not.
Yeah, it's so much easier to define than who you are. And eventually, I guess you'll arrive at the answer, because you've eliminated a bunch of stuff anyway. But I'm a big believer. I think
you're all for elimination.
Even, people, everything, right? People or things that you eat.
Want to focus on.
Yeah, it just helps you draw it back to
you
something.
Have to do that curation for yourself at some level to say that, I don't want these kind of people in my life. Now, that these kind would be anything, by the way.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Or you would say, I definitely wish to have more people like this in my life. And maybe I'll ask friends of friends to connect me or whatever, that your method may be or whatever.
That's very true. I think that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think there's also, and why I worry so much about the word curation, right? It just somehow takes me to a Pinterest or takes me to something. I'm like, this is too manicured, too manufactured. But I think within that also, like, you will be able to find that quirk or that style or that tone or that one thing which you still resonate with further, right? So that is then going deeper into it after you've eliminated or shortlisted what you like, don't like, etc. But the nuance, like you said, right? Like, what about a certain metal band do you not like, and why that is? I think you'll start sort of reflecting
and
on
then that kind of gives you a sort of internal algorithm to find more of that kind of thing, even though that might come from somewhere completely different. So if you sit and think about why you like the prog metal bands that you do, it might actually help you find your next, like, which classical musician who you might resonate with, for example. And maybe you extrapolate that later to the kind of books that you might enjoy. Or not. One theory that I have might be, I listen to a lot of complex music. So the OTT shows that I consume I can't take two cerebral things. So it has to balance that out. So that needs to be lighter. So I'm a Schitt's Creek and prog metal guy.
That's amazing.
So that's, I mean, I don't know. Those are
the two Chucks that live within one.
We all have multitudes.
There are two Chucks and he feeds both. No, and that's true, because I feel that even when I think of travel, right, I feel all travel is self-discovery. Because when you go to a place, you may like something which not everybody else likes. And then you start questioning. Like, I grew up in Gujarat for the most part of my life, and stepwells, there are fair few many stepwells there, right? Which is not a very obvious thing for people to go and see. And then I started understanding what is my fascination with stepwells, right? What is my fascination with water, right? And then I started understanding, okay, went into this space of how water is fundamental to how civilizations came about, right? There's an Indus Valley civilization. There's one in Egypt around Nile, and then it takes you into places which actually allows you to. So sometimes I feel these are just portals for you to actually, get into other things, and then, you will chase. But outside of this lovely little thing which you are discussing, I have a different question. One of the things you had written about once was that, media is an execution business. Right? You talked about distribution and consistency a little while before, right? And you've been with Business Insider, and I love the two things which they do. One is So Expensive as a series and Still Standing. Right?
And all the others also.
All the others,
Big Batches and all those. Big fan.
And then if you look at, we were talking about the Wired thing.
The Wired thing as well,
Wired has a rule, they get these experts and, answer questions or whatever it is, right? Now they are in many ways templates, right? That they are formats within formats, right? As someone who works on the monetization side of content, right? Talk to me about how these templates come about. What kind of roles do they play for large organizations, large content companies?
So I'll tell you, this again stems from a very interesting thing. I mean, again, it's not interesting in that sense, but whatever. One of our photography professors at BMM said there are two schools of thought. One is school of thought, which is idea-led. Second is execution-led.
Look
Right.
at that, yeah.
So you could be somebody who comes up with a gazillion ideas and you're just an idea factory, but you're not very savvy with seeing it through.
Yeah.
And then you could be somebody who's really good at executing something, but, don't have those many sort of ideas, right? This stuck with me, obviously. It's something that just comes to me anytime somebody says the word execution. I'm like, yeah, but what about the idea? And then the other way around. So I am somebody who is, maybe it's because I'm not the most creative person, or rather I don't consider myself the most creative person. So I would think execution is at the center of it. But at the same time, obviously, we've seen execution really take a certain idea to a whole new scale because it's just that well thought through.
Yeah.
And by execution, I don't just mean a checklist of what's to be done when, a Gantt chart around it. There's actually a lot of nuance in getting things right. And that's why, again, I go back to the pace and the tonality and the taste of it or whatever, right? There's so many. The idea could be anything, but like what shape and form is it going to take?
Yeah.
Everything from the duration of the thing to how much depth do you want to go into, to is it going to be an interview format, or is it going to be a direct to camera format, or there are just too many things to play with. But I think the execution really is where you start asking these questions
100%, yeah.
and you start defining it for you. And then that's when you really start picking the right crew who is good at a certain thing, right? So we will have certain photographers who are good at capturing a certain mood over somebody else. You'll have certain videographers who are, who can do, I don't know, some kind of innovation within the format versus some who can't, right? So editing, I think, is very, very, it really changes the whole format, right? It's really about
Editing is storytelling in itself.
Exactly. And sound, like you were talking about earlier. I think all of this is start coming into play when you start thinking about the execution of it. Because, and I'm somebody who's just generally a bit paranoid as a person. So I get very anxious. So I want all the answers early on. So my whole philosophy is preempt what's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
And then start
I agree. We share the same therapist, it looks like.
So, and when it comes to preempting, right, then you sit with the whole crew.
Correct,
You start asking each stakeholder the question, saying, okay, what's going to go wrong when we go on the shoot day?
Yeah.
What's going to go wrong when you think it's going to rain and, you don't have the right lights or, backup?
I think this is anyone who's worked at a music festival is like automatically wired into you to think of what all can possibly go wrong.
A lot can. That's exactly
Because when you
why,
said the word rain, I'm like, yes, I see where this trauma is coming from.
And I was an insider box office for a very long time. So
sorry, you were saying execution,
but essentially all the things, and things can go wrong is just stuff you cannot even preempt, right? Like a drunk person at a, box office can try to do some ruckus and you're like, okay, you don't have a playbook for this, but that's when your chops of execution, your, way to be able to tackle sticky situations, have hard conversations, negotiate, with the person, irrational things that are happening there in those moments. All of this, in my view, comes under the word execution. So I think execution is extremely important. Once, of course, you've refined your idea. I'm not saying it has to be only that, right? It still stems from a thing that you want to talk about or something that you want to say or the insight, like we were talking about. What's the insight? Why are we even doing this?
Yeah.
How is this going to benefit a larger group of people? And I think the insight could be a data point.
Yeah.
The insight could be a personal experience. The insight could be stemming from anywhere. The idea rather could be stemming from anywhere.
Yeah.
But I think stuff like So Expensive was still standing. What I love about these types of concepts is it seems so obvious.
Yeah.
It's like, I could have thought of this.
Yeah.
It's just the beauty of it.
You mean the concept, right? You mean the concept.
That's why it's a great insight. It's obvious when someone tells you.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is life at large, right? I would ask my dad really big questions as a young kid. And it would just be like, the answer to this seems obvious. But, just being able to draw the understanding that's still standing could be something that people are generally curious about. Like everyone thinks about, this company has been around for 100 to 150, 200 years. This entire generation of people have learned this particular craft for so long. How is it still standing? Like it is genuinely like something you would actually think about, and then you
Yeah.
see it and you're like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these formats have cracked that, right?
Yes.
Which is
Yes.
innate curiosity and so expensive also, right?
Yeah.
Stuff that, why is cardamom in this particular village
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
India
Yeah.
like the most expensive cardamom in the world, or truffles or whatever? And
Yeah.
I think it's very smart.
To me, there are two big lessons to take away from the success of series such as So Expensive, Wired's Autocomplete, and all that. One is storytelling. I think all of them have a certain storytelling aspect. You're kind of like rooting for that Korean kid who, grew seaweed and wanted to see something. You're now suddenly invested in this thing that you never thought about before, right? For those 7-8 minutes. The second lesson really for me is the power of packaging, right? And I think this is something, again, that media companies get right a lot, maybe because they look at it from that lens, which is this is not an interview. We'll call it 72 questions. We are not going to do a series of companies that are still around.
73.
We will, 73, sorry, that shows, it shows,
Yeah.
like,
You're
we're gonna
right, the
packaging.
yeah.
I think that packaging really does matter. And I have always been an advocate of this. Like, sure, you're going to do the same amount of work, but with a little level of packaging on top of it, it suddenly becomes what I like to think of as more PRable. It's more a talking point. So now you're not going to say, did you watch Business Insider's video about seaweed? But now you say Business Insider is a series on this. And going back to your point, which you said earlier, there's a certain level of predictability. There's a certain level of, okay, this is what to expect next time. Like, by the way, like Business Insider is our comfort food while we have dinner, because both of us eat very fast. The length of one video is exactly what, like, that's our, like, where we go.
Right.
But yeah, I think to me that packaging aspect is very important. I've always sort of think about, okay, see, you're putting in the work anyway, just brand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that has been, like, so what I like to think of, you get a sum, the sum is more than, the whole is more than the sum of its parts.
And
in
it
that
gives
way.
it longevity.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. It gives you a direction in terms of what your 11th, 12th video should be.
Absolutely. And I would say 100th video, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. You can now diverse. And I think at that point, when you're trying to brand it, again, you have to ask yourself very important questions about, can I scale this beyond a certain geography?
Yes.
Can I scale it beyond a certain theme, right? Whether it's food or jewelry or X, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And those are the questions then really have to play an important role at that point when you are not making it too narrow. Think of it as crypto videos.
Sure.
Happened a lot in that 2 years when obviously things were. But how could somebody have given it longevity? Could it have had a slightly bigger thematic thing and you could have made this a subtopic of it? So I think that's what branding helps with rather. It again helps you reflect to say, is this something I want to do for the next 5 years? Am I building out for 10 years? Am I building it out for that long? Or am I building it out for now? And then this will become a subset of something,
large.
That I feed it into.
So actually, one of the things which how I think of it is, does this idea have finite bounds or infinite bounds? Right? Your finite bound is there's only one bound which you can define. But moment you have infinite bounds, I can increase it. And I can go through that exercise multiple times, still staying true to the original promise which that thing started out with. Right? So for example, if today So Expensive is about certain kinds of products, I could also extend So Expensive to say, why is this particular brand's luxury bag so expensive? Right? Or I could go and say, why is this Michelin star restaurant's food, which is literally foraged from 50 kilometers of where they live, so expensive? And if we're just taking an example, but I think
right, though. And these infinite bonds are actually important. It's a great way of putting it because it's like you're saying portals, right? Like what can you open from it and come back to? What can you open and come back to? So I think visualizing a lot of this also starts to help you, figure out that framework and longevity and branding. I think, all of these are important questions to ask yourself at the time of kickoff without adding too much pressure on yourself somehow. But
I'm thinking, like, as you're saying this, like these series by themselves, right? This So Expensive, there's Big Batches, so on and so forth. I think there are 5 or 6 series right now. I'm now wondering whether you can go one level above and there's something tying all of it together, right? Whether it is making sense of our complicated world or trying to put the human element behind all of these things, or everything that you are wearing, touching, feeling, seeing, there's actually a lot that goes behind it, whatever the case may be. There are so many angles that as at a company level, at a brand level, you could like jump up from there. Or you have already had this codified and you're going the other way down. So to me, and I don't know what the answer for say Condé Nast might be, but I'm thinking now from a creator point of view and trying to take lessons from there, is that start somewhere in the middle. You might be able to go up or down, and you don't know, like eventually, for example, over time, like yeah, sure, you say that you want to make reels on travel, for example, do it for some period of time, see what are the themes that stick most with you, and then do that for some time, and then see, okay, what's the things that look at the broad themes. What do those mean together? Now that will help you find whatever those purpose or whatever you want to call it. What are you driven by, motivated by, all that sort of thing. So maybe that's another way of looking at it.
I think all of this makes a lot of sense. And going to what you said about, again, I'm really not in the room where all this was conceptualized.
Of course, yeah,
But
sure,
This is
sure.
my version. This is all, by the way, BIUS in that big way. But I'm saying my interpretation of it is it could be what you're saying, which I feel the fundamentals for somebody which is that large an ecosystem or has that kind of a team behind it, thought of people, companies, ideas.
Yeah.
That I think anyway is the BI code.
Yeah.
So it is, I think, well defined. And then you sort of find your, storytelling pegs or formats or templates or whatever from underneath that, which still is a business-led conversation, right? So Business Insider and the name anyway lends to the fact that, okay, either this business is expensive or this business has been around for so long or the people behind the business, right? So I think that overarching literally kind of comes from the name of it in that specific example. But coming to the creator piece as well, I agree you do kind of start somewhere in the middle. See, it's not possible, and you shouldn't actually aim to have these answers before you
Absolutely not.
ever release.
Nobody
or
has it.
launch. Exactly. And it is an evolving process, and it should be one, because if you try and find these answers, I don't think you'll ever launch. So it'll just be like, because you can intellectualize this forever, but until you get down to the execution of it, there's no way to find or preempt. Again, you'll find lots of frameworks that will help you check certain boxes and figuring out duration, X, Y, right? And whatever is your bandwidth to be able to create something, inherently you will have a skill that you will apply to it, whether you're good at writing or you're very comfortable with being in front of the camera. That can define if you want a newsletter or if you want a podcast or if you want both in your case. So, but yeah, I think that kind of will give you a little bit of and that's intuition also, right? You got to trust your instinct a little bit to just take that leap initially. And then, yes, you can go back and see, okay, I did this well, or even the stats kind of proved that this worked a little bit better. And then once you have a bank, once you've experimented, once you're being able to go back, and then that, hindsight will help you define probably the way forward. And I think creators have the luxury to do that in that sense, which maybe businesses don't to that extent.
Of course. Yeah.
So, I think use that to the advantage and just play around for the initial few things. And like I said, the smaller sample sets can also help in this, where you've tried it and released it in smaller groups of people and to see what's flying, what's not.
So I'm going to take this thing of, the ability to try around things, right? And think of it as all of us have grown to a generation from where there were creators in the more traditional sense of people who pursued art, right? And now there are creators who are regular people, but now have started to become big enough that not only are they running successful content creation projects for themselves, but now they are building companies. For Nas Daily as an example, right? Starts off as one person and now has gone to various products and so on. But at the same time, in an age where platforms dominate, right? What is the eventual path a creator takes, right? Does it essentially mean that at some point you will get acquired by someone big enough to say that is the payoffs, right? And you're saying that you cannot really exist as a creator beyond a certain size. Because when you go beyond a certain size, it probably becomes very difficult, and then you are competing with a whole set of things. So on that sliding scale of being an independent creator just for the fun of it, to making a living out it for yourself, to building a company, to making it something even larger, where do you think is the possibility for independent creator to be?
Okay, Okay, I don't really think I have the answer for this, but I'm just thinking what I see on Shark Tank, for example, right? If you see a lot of businesses start out with passion. They say, okay, I love baking. Now I'm a baker. I make cupcakes. Great. I have one store. I have one outlet. I do this well. It's almost profitable and it's doing great on its own. Then the ambition kicks in to say, okay, what next and how much more can I do this? Can it become a second location, or can I start selling online, or can I start packaging this? I'm taking all Shark Tank US multiple seasons that I've watched to see, okay, they say retail versus, I don't know, start making the,
Banner.
or get into other bakery products, whatever, right? I think you go product-wise, you can expand, geography-wise, you can expand. Format-wise, you can expand. You can sell a mix of your cupcake.
Yeah.
Pooja Dhingra did that with, you can actually make stuff at home, right? So your recipe travels. There are many ways to do it, but I think you need a financial advisor to really sort of help you find that answer. And again, your ambition to see what do you see yourself doing in the future, or where do you see this sort of seed of an idea flourish into? And yeah, I think I feel it's a technical question, because I feel people don't really, you can do a lot with it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can make merch with it, and then merch is again the very immediate next step you can play with and can make you money, but then is it really sustainable? So yeah, I think that there are too many questions to be answered before you figure at each stage, and I'm sure the complications at each stage
That's
are
the thing.
also different, right? There are 4 stages you just described, all of which have a very different set of questions one would need to answer to say, for how long can I keep this up? And then do you need people to invest in you? Then do you need co-conspirators, right? Or even the subscription model we were talking about earlier. Is that really, where is the market at, right? Like, do you even have that group of people who are going to pay you for something month on month, year on year to subscribe to you?
1,000%, yeah. It's, and along with, like you said, financial advisor, but I would add therapist to it, because I think it's important. Like the ambition that you have is really important. Like, I am blown away by these restaurants or bakeries. I say, no, one location. If you want to come over here, it's going to be sold out by 7:30 in the morning. Come tomorrow if you want again. I think those are the most actualized of them all. Like, it's almost like there is a, sorry, I tend to frame
It's culture in many ways, right? That if capitalism tells me to scale, I'm like, I'm not scaling.
And that becomes its own branding, ironically, right?
That's true.
We have no branches, proudly being displayed. But it's almost like, I tend to frameworkify all answers that guests tend to give away. There's almost like there's a headache versus payoff ratio everywhere. And you have to decide, like, whether, sure, if you want 100 locations all over the world, yes, your name will be out there. You'll probably make a lot of money and all that. But boy, are you going to have to sacrifice your weekends, your sanity and all that?
Mortgage, home, like people do so many things to give up on and feed it into the business.
Yeah. And at some point of time, I think, like, for me, that I realized where I fall on that spectrum like a long time back. And I was very clear, like, okay, there are some people who have more ambition to make more money or have more fame or whatever the case, maybe than me, but I'm not willing to put in. For me, my free time is valuable. I'm going to hold that very dear. I don't want this business, for example, to reach such a point where I need to sacrifice everything to have 6% club shops all over India and all that sort of thing. If you disagree, then we need to have a conversation at some point of time.
One of the books I am reading is called The Company of One. So you can assure me.
Oh dear God.
I'm not going to disagree with you on that.
Okay, fair enough. No, so jokes apart, the point I'm saying, I think people have to, I don't think there's a right or wrong in this spectrum, right? I think it's up for people to, one, decide where they want to be, and two, accept that wherever they're going to be, there is a payoff. If you're over here, you are only going to make so much amount of money, you won't have fame, etc., etc. If you are over here, then you are going to have to sacrifice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, every single interview from, say, all business podcasts, right? Like all the how I built it, all the way to Shark Tank and all that. Everybody, like 20 minutes will be spent just talking about what sacrifices I made in order to get over here. Now, I listen to all those and for me, I'm like, boss, having a multi-crore brand or multi-million-dollar business is not worth it for me to, like, for me, I value my Saturdays and Sundays, right? I'm not going to be doing that. But fair enough, I think that's one way to think about content project and business both, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. And I feel like, again, it's really about for a lot of people, the question can also be further down the line to say, okay, do I want to leave a legacy?
Yeah.
Do I want to pass this on to somebody? Could be actually, I want to make enough money to be able to pass it off to my future. Like there's so many contexts, not just legacy in terms of your brand or your name or your fame, but and some things are out of, I don't know, just sheer grit, right?
Yeah.
I will see this through. And there are so many people like that. So I think it's a personal choice. You do need people as sounding boards to figure where you want to be on that spectrum. And like,
the more we speak to people like you and just various people who have sat in that chair that you have, I think it's become more important to kind of figure out what it is that your end game is, right? There are some of my friends who say, listen, I'm going to slog in my 30s, not have a life at all because I want to retire by 40. I'm like, that's a insanely... I wouldn't do it, but it's a very sharp, admirable goal to kind of have because you have something that's that sharp to work. Now, whether I agree with you, I don't care. Right? It doesn't matter. It's immaterial. But whether I would do that, no. But it's great that you've thought this through to a point and you've engineered your 30s so that you can reach that situation. I think a lot of frustration, especially among our generation, comes from people who are just in the rut. And are not sure what rut is kind of leading to.
Yeah,
especially when you reflect.
For you, exactly.
Yeah, especially
leads to what end?
It leads to what end, especially when you realize that if you're like say 35, you probably are going to be working for another 20, 25 years and maybe living another 20 after that. Is this what the rest of your life is going to look like? And then I think that brings in many existential questions. There's one big diagram, no? Like this means how many days you have left, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, there's a book, I think 4,000 weeks or something, which tells you that you only have 4,000 weeks to live. So what are you going to do in those weeks? And there's a beautiful quote by Annie Dillard which says that the way we spend our days is how we spend our lives. Right. So ultimately, if you are in the rut and if you're always in the rut, well, the rest of your life is going to be a rut.
But I think really, and how you define rut/work is up to you.
It's up to you.
Me, I've seen my dad and his generation of people. There are people he hangs out with right now who well retired but are supremely active. Sold off their companies in their 50s, 60s. They're like this one person he works with, 87-year-old. He sends emails like constantly. They're part of an association. They're trying to further the mission of the industry. Nice. They have other ambitions. So to him, it's really then about how do I stay active? How do I stay productive? How do I help people around me? At different age groups. I think we're talking in our 30s right now, but we'll have very different answers. 10 years hence and, 10 years
When we call you back for season 10 of this.
Amazing. Longevity, right? We're thinking of branding this for a while. But yeah, I think it really is at the life stage you're in. Do you have children or not? All of these really will add up to how you're making your decisions and how you want to design your life. And that really feeds into how much time you want to spend doing this and if the payoff is money or the fame or just the little circle.
I think one thing that our generation especially doesn't take the time to do is actually reflect on these things, right? Like I once interviewed Rohan Joshi a long time back, and one question that I asked him was, how did it feel just being on the entire niche podcast to getting Shah Rukh Khan on in such a short period of time? Like there was a period of 4 or 5 years where all that happened. Like what did it feel like for you to see just zeros keep adding to both the amounts in your bank balance and the views? Right? He says genuinely we had no time to think about it. You had one thing and then moved on to the next. Before you know it, suddenly Alia Bhatt, Shah Rukh Khan, this thing, that, like, and then once everything stopped, he then got the chance to reflect on everything. And the sort of conversation we had at that point of time was like, people should, like, even if it's just for a few minutes every week or month or whatever, just step out of your life just to reflect on where you are, what's kind of giving you happiness, all that sort of thing. And I think that's something that people should kind of do, because all these questions that we're talking about, what do you actually want out of life, Rat, how long are you going to do this, gets answered by, these are some of the most difficult questions, right? And also I'm fond of thinking there's so many quotes that we found cheesy in your 20s which are like desperately trying to answer.
Oh my God.
Floodgates have been opened.
I have to talk about this quote, okay? There's a journey, there is a quote by this European philosopher. I think it's pronounced as Rilke. I don't know what it is pronounced as. The only journey worth taking is within. Okay. What garbage is this?
Cue music.
I'm like, what is this? And now I am like, it makes complete sense.
I would get that tattooed on myself.
Really, I mean, it makes complete sense, because ultimately, for the lack of a better word, you have to, over a period of a decade or a couple of decades, you have to figure out what your purpose is.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody's born with a purpose. Human life has no purpose. We are animals who exist as just another species on the planet. We have to find purpose for us.
Yeah. Unless you take it to George Carlin level and say the only purpose that we have over here is to make plastic for the earth.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. That's why God put us here. He answered the question.
Yeah. No, but
Why are we here? Plastic.
so on the flip side of this, right, just for the sake of debate, I don't really know anymore if we need to find meaning at
we
work
don't need to. Sure.
or calling or purpose or whatever. I think you are productive for a few hours a day. It, sort of pays for the bills. You have certain hours for leisure. You have certain hours for exploration, for fun, for, I don't know, watching interesting movies, whatever that be. But I was saying this whole idea of finding meaning at work again pressurizes us to be able to say, if I'm not finding this meaning, then is it really something that it could actually just be something you're really good at?
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fine. There are some wonderful people who I know who are really good at their jobs who don't have a LinkedIn presence. So sometimes when people ask me, like,
But I'm not like that. I want meaning at work, but I'm just saying,
I make it pretty. I don't have a LinkedIn presence. How can I become a good professional? By actually doing a good job would be a good start. Like, like there are.
It's the last thing you should worry about if you're worried about being a good professional.
Actually, genuinely, and I feel going back to what you were saying, it's almost like people who are not on LinkedIn or not on Instagram, that's kind of like a branding for themselves. Like there's some amazing rock musicians who are famously not on Instagram. And I think like James Hetfield, the lead vocalist of Metallica, the biggest rock band in the world, he is famously not on any social media. And that kind of becomes a branding by itself. Of course, now it's a different matter about whether if they had started today, that's another
different
discussion.
Story,
Exactly.
That's a different story. I still think it is possible. There are examples of that as well. But anyway,
But Instagram's too new. So that point holds true. Because think of Kareena Kapoor, I think she came on much late. Zeenat Aman, obviously, like... So I think it's also now become a moment to launch yourself on it or whatever. But I think more than the whole rut piece, I would just saying you still need to find pleasure.
Pleasure.
Like you have to have your thresholds of what you enjoy and what you hate. And that actually holds true for even work. Like I think one of these Adam Grant / equivalents, whatever I keep reading online, said, there will be work that you don't like to do, even within the stuff that you are
100%,
responsible for doing.
Yeah, which is the other thing that Rohan said. People only see the 1 hour on stage.
Yeah, exactly, right? But the practice behind it and
rejection.
For me, it's like the paperwork.
Yeah,
admin work, exactly.
Work,
Following up for payments.
Exactly.
People, I'm like, bro, you have to pay me. This is not going to work.
I don't think there's any job, profession, anything where you're just doing pure what you like.
Yeah. So I think, and that feels like rut work because then you're suddenly like, okay, I'm caught up doing things that it's part of the thing, man. Like make your peace with it. I think sometimes you just got to know that not everything is enjoyable and it's fine. Just go through the process. But what is at the other end?
It's again that spectrum that we spoke about, headache versus payoff, right? The only way in which you can completely do what you love purely is if you're just sitting in a corner playing a guitar for yourself and that makes you happy. Great. I know people like that. But if you want
you pay off
this thing, payoff, more of a payoff, money, whatever, then there is an element of headache that comes in.
Yeah. And the sooner you accept, I think the faster you'll be on the journey to get where you want to be. Yeah.
That comes down to coming into your 30s and say, I will just accept things I can't change.
Yeah. Precisely.
Why bother? Now, why bother any mental bandwidth spending on it?
You are in a modern world. You have to be able to do certain things. Like for me, one of the things would be, okay, this whole idea of putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
You don't know, you got to test the waters, right? Same with like, every month I would make a to-do list of like, okay, I got to be posting more on LinkedIn. I got to, again, I don't know when it's going to manifest, but my point being, I don't think in today's day and age, professionals have the option to not, or again, you have the underlying pressure to do it, but you can choose, where you fall on that spectrum to see,
again,
how much you want to indulge in that. But if you can manage it and if it's like a few posts a week or a month, why not? I mean, those are the basics that you can start getting into a rhythm with and figure your way around that. So I think for creators also, it's a similar takeaway, right? Where you draw that line.
And then some people become social media mavens. So.
Yeah, or ninjas.
Or ninjas.
Had to.
On basically social media maven, like
I became
Just want to show that, oh, I know extra English. I know Maven as a word.
Don't blame me, blame my former HR. You're
Who
looking
came
at
up
me
with
as
interesting
a...
title.
Oh, I thought you decided that to be your...
Oh, dear God, no. Dear God.
Okay, now it's fine.
Now it's fine.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right? Okay. I thought you were said,
The
I am
Maven
social
came to
media
him. He
Maven.
didn't go to the.
This was
he
my
didn't attach it
designation.
to himself.
Like, the people are like, I'm game changer. I'm like, okay. I don't know what that means, but I'm happy you are changing whatever game you are playing. But good for you, bro.
No, again, the early 2010s was a different time. It was...
You found ways to make it interesting and get young people into exploring the Ninja and Maven jobs.
Only question I want to ask, and I think I'm going to ask this to all our guests. In your head, purely for personal reasons, for joy or fun, is there a content project you have thought of which you have never executed for whatever reason? I just want to know if you have, and what is that?
So I don't know if this construes as content, but Kavita Rajwade and I very briefly had, I don't want to say started, but whatever, a thing we were doing called the Small Talk,
Okay.
where we would invite, I think, 2 friends who had to bring 2 more friends,
Okay.
and then each of us had to bring a friend, something to that effect, where we were like, just keep bringing +1s basically, and make a group of 6, 8, 10 people max to go for a meal.
Okay.
Idea was just to, have conversations, keep it fluid, keep it fun. We didn't record it. We didn't do anything with it.
Perfect.
We just had.
Not everything needs to be recorded. Thank you.
But now if you didn't take a photo, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So, no, but it was great. It was just fun. We did it for a few months. It fizzled out. But I mean, those are, I like smaller groups. I really don't thrive in like larger, this thing. I like the 2s, 3s, 5s, that kind of a setup. So I would enjoy that. I do want to meet more people from the media space simply because what you guys are doing is excellent. And I also feel there's an entire universe of things that I engage with but don't fully understand, right? And by fully understand, I mean because it's so fast evolving, how do you keep up with it? And, different ways in which we can challenge each other, push each other. I just enjoy that kind of stuff, so I would want to do it. But no, I haven't thought of a project or put it in any format, shape, form, nothing. But yeah, I just want to find ways to meet interesting people and see.
That's building a community of people around you. So yeah.
Yeah, so not a content project, but something like the Small Talk or whatever.
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
Super. Thank you so much, Haley, for coming on.
I had a great time.
We learned a ton of stuff and also got a bit of validation as someone in their 30s. Okay, good. There are other smart people out there who are thinking the same things. Very, very validating for us personally. So
this is therapy for us.
Yeah. Seriously, thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.